For the greater part of Latvian history, its people were subjected to foreign powers. This period is known as the 700 years of slavery in Latvian tradition. It was set off in the 13th century by the brazen crusaders of Germany. In this series, we will see how the militia of Christ settled the native land of the Baltic heathens and secured a centuries-long German cultural presence in the Baltic. In the late 12th century, the Baltic was inhabited by a variety of squabbling pagan tribes and chiefdoms. Meanwhile, Christianity reigned as the dominant religion in the greater part of Europe. Missionaries from Germany had already made ventures to the foggy wetlands of the Baltic, the last pagan bastion in Europe, but the indigenous peoples steadfastly refused to renounce. In 1184, a lowly monk named Meinhard made the arduous trek to the Baltic, up the river Daugava to the land of the Livonian tribe, with the aim of preaching Christianity. He achieved greater success than anyone before him by being patient and amicable to the natives. In 1186, Meinhard was appointed Bishop of Livonia, and his private mission was now backed by the Pope, head of the Catholic Church. He also oversaw the building of new fortifications, which endeared him to the locals. Throughout the next decade, peaceful means of conversion did not yield satisfactory results, and so the Pope decided to turn to more forceful measures. In 1196, a crusade was called to dispel the Baltic heathens. The tribesmen of Livonia naturally turned hostile and threw off Christianity. The elderly Bishop Meinhard died of illness quickly thereafter. In 1198, Meinhard's successor, Bishop Berthold, led contingents of Saxon knights in the first battle of the crusade. He was killed by the Libyc warriors, supposedly torn apart limb by limb. The unenviable task of revitalizing the crusade was now taken up by Bishop Albert, who nevertheless energetically began organizing a renewed expedition to the boggy homeland of the Livonians. In 1200, he entered the mouth of the Daugava with 22 ships and took control of the river's downstream lands. Albert next founded the city of Riga, which is now the capital of Latvia, but in 1202 it served as a convenient seat for Albert's bishopric, situated close to the entrance of the Daugava and easy to resupply by sea. However, a major hindrance was that most of the knights fighting for the crusade did not operate indefinitely in the employ of Bishop Albert, as few wanted to settle permanently in hostile land under constant threat of pagan retribution. Thus, Albert needed a permanent militia unit to maintain his conquests. In view of this concern, Albert of Riga instituted his own chivalric crusading order, the Livonian Brothers of the Sword. They would function as a permanent complement of knights garrisoning captured settlements and acting as a seasoned corps of the Crusader forces. However, while they were in theory subservient to Albert, the brothers were in practice unruly and often pursued their own interests at the expense of the local inhabitants. In 1205, Bishop Albert of Riga was ready to commence his offensive. He departed for Germany in February to gather forces for his planned summer campaign up the Daugava. Immediately after, an imposing horde of Lithuanian riders passed Riga. They were hoping to plunder the ripe counties of Estonia. Soon after, Viesurs, headman of the Semigalian tribe, visited Riga and compelled the Germans to help him confront the rampant Lithuanians, who posed an imminent danger to pagans and Christians alike. At Ruopaji, the sword-bearers scattered the mass of Lithuanians who were dazzled by their bright armor. They had thus won their first battle. Bishop Albert returned to his domain in the summer and promptly ordered an attack along the Daugava. The Crusaders captured Lielvārde and Aizkraukle. In 1206, Kaupo, the distinguished chieftain of Turaida, was expelled from his domains by the Livs because he was accused of collaborating with Bishop Albert. Kaupo sought to reclaim Turayda with the help of the Crusaders. The Sword Brethren and Viesur Semigals aided Kaupo in torching his own former stronghold, for which he earned the regard of the German colonizer. Following the victory at Turayda, most Libyc headmen conformed to German rule and would henceforth be forced to contribute to Albert's campaign. By now the ranks of the Sword Brethren had swelled significantly, and soon enough the willful brothers began demanding land, 1/3 of all conquered territory. Albert was displeased with the ever-heightening indiscipline of his knightly warriors. However, with the mediation of the Pope, the dispute was decided in favor of the order, and the Sword Brothers were granted fiefs in the newly won land. Bishop Albert nevertheless resumed his campaigns up the Daugava. The Germans took Kuknese in 1207 and Sailpils the following year. In 1209, Albert set about claiming the wealthy city of Jersika, his last hindrance to full domination of the Daugava River. The Sword Brethren took the city by surprise and forced Jersika's prince Visvaldis to flee to the other bank of the river. Visvaldis looked back to see smoke rise from his beloved citadel. He later visited Riga, and in return for relinquishing most of his kingdom to Albert of Riga, kept ruling Jersika as a German puppet. A year later, the Prince of Polotsk, ruler of one of the Russian principalities, also recognized German ascendancy on the Daugava. In 1210, Albert once again set off to collect knights in Germany for further conquests in Estonia. However, his ships were met at sea and scattered by a fleet of Curonian warships. Albert, having lost many invaluable men, escaped back to Livonia. The Curonians had thus broken a long chain of Christian triumphs and were now prepared to fully evict the Germans from the Baltic by assailing Riga itself. Bishop Albert nevertheless departed Livonia for a second time, leaving scant forces to preserve Riga. The Curonians assembled their fleet and swiftly entered the mouth of the Daugava. On the 12th of July, the citizens of Riga witnessed a swarm of pagan vessels surging towards them. The Kurds disembarked and arrayed their lines facing the gates of the city. The Sword Brethren and the baptized Livic tribesmen ventured out to contest the heathens, but after a 3-hour-long vigorous fight, they were forced back to the gates. As the Kurds encircled the city and fire started to engulf the countryside, the defenders' spirits dampened. But just then, additional Christian contingents materialized north of Riga. They were poised to sever the pagans' access to their ships, instigating a Curonian retreat across the Daugava. The Church of Livonia had narrowly avoided a sudden and catastrophic defeat at the hands of the infidel horde, and now stood firmer than before. In the next episode, we will see the Estonian struggle for independence in the face of the onrushing German invaders.